John Shannon, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast and the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. How are you, Mike?
Good. Anytime you can mention Kalamalka Lake is important, because Barry's house on Kalamalka Lake is very impressive.
I have no doubt. Of course, he is a native Manitoban.
He's a Dauphin boy,
Yes. And there happens to be an opening. There's not even an opening here, technically. There's an opening with the Jets. More on that in a second. It's a bit of a bombshell, John. He had been to the Final Four of the NHL the previous 2 years before this one. He's a brand name coach with the Stanley Cup ring. What brought Lou Lamoriello to decide he should no longer be the head coach of the New York Islanders?
Missing the playoffs is important to Lou. Missing the playoffs. And I think that, without knowing exactly what the conversations were like, I'm sure that Barry was disappointed that when they did go to the Final Four in the Stanley Cup playoffs, when Devin Taves and Nick Leddy were part of that defense. Well, Taves is part of a big defense now in Colorado, and Leddy's playing for the St. Louis Blues after a stop in Detroit. And I think that there are times that philosophically there might have been a difference of opinion. Lou likes certain style players. He likes certain style of game. In the last 3 years, the Islanders got older and slower. And I'm not sure that that's what Barry would have liked. They had unbelievable respect for each other in their tenure there. But I had heard this 2 weeks ago that there was something going on with Barry, and people were surprised when I had heard. I asked them the question, and here we are 2 weeks later, and it's happened.
Matthew Barzal's been a different player under Doug Weight versus Trotz, understandably so, with how each of those two coach. But is the happiness of Matthew Barzal a part of this equation, do you think?
There's only one person who needs to be happy, Blake, in the Islander regime, and that's Lou. Lou is the only person that matters. The one thing I would say is that they had a honeymoon year with missing the playoffs with their new arena. I suspect that there'll be pressure that they can't miss the playoffs a second year in their new arena. And that's exactly what Lou is trying to avoid.
I guess the happiness thing would be more that Barzal's going into the final year of a contract, and that will affect Lou's happiness, because how easy that contract negotiation is with Barzal will determine Lou's happiness, right?
Yeah, but, Lou has a master plan for everythhin. He always has and always will. That's the only way he knows how to do business. So I suspect that, in the Barzal scenario will fit in at some point at some place, but it will be under Lou's style and Lou's philosophy that things like that occur at this point.
He better have a master plan, because when you look at the number of players on that team that are 30 or north thereof,
with years left,
term left on their deals, I suspect the Islanders might be a busier team here this offseason and going forward.
Well, and then you have to wonder who's going to replace Barry Trotz. And I talked to one NHL executive today that said, because the name Lane Lambert's already come up, was on Barry's staff and has been rumored for a few other jobs throughout the NHL at times. But with that experienced roster that they have, this executive actually told me he'd be surprised that Lou wouldn't go with an experienced coach. And so from that perspective, you have to wonder where people the likes of John Tortorella fit into all of this. Because, John wants to get back into the game badly. And I mean, capital B, badly. And, he's a demanding coach, and Lou likes demanding coaches. So I would not be surprised that we start hearing John Tortorella's name surface for a few of these jobs very soon.
Are you telling me that Torts isn't enjoying his time in television?
He hasn't been on the air for about, I was going to say 4 or 5 weeks. He has not been on.
I noticed that they were poking fun at that on the air.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I don't get ESPN3, the digital thing, where the point their Point TV show goes. But I have not seen John on very much, and he certainly has not done any Stanley Cup playoff games. So again, John Tortorella will be coaching the NHL next year. I would almost go with Matt's money to the bank with that one. But
I bet Matt's money on everything. It's very satisfying. Very satisfying.
But so I think we're going to start hearing Tortorella's name with a few of these jobs, Philly or the Islanders.
It's funny because Barry Trotz, Lane Lambert, his deputy, whom you mentioned, and Bruce Boudreau here in Vancouver, all represented by the same agent, Gil Scott. Yeah. Is there
That's right.
any chance the Canucks folks are looking at Trotz going, ooh, Bruce says no and doesn't want this gig anymore?
Well, listen.
Let's go get Vernon's Barry Trotz.
Vernon, you're right. When I told you that I had heard about Barry 2 weeks ago, I had the team that was identified with him at that point was Winnipeg, that he would be sought after by the Jets to take over that job. And I see Ken Wiebe has written that today on sportsnet.ca. But it would not surprise me that with what the Jets feel they need, Barry Trotz's attention to detail and his demand of his players is something I think that the Jets could dearly use.
Are you buying this? Trotz may want to look into management.
No,
they seem to last longer in the front office than they do on the bench.
Yeah, I'm not, because coaches are coaches. It's in their DNA. It's something that those guys like, that level of action and being on ice level. I think that they all yearn to be managers and then realize at some point, you know what, I'm better off being a coach. Let me look at Mike Keenan. Mike Keenan is the best example of this. And Mike tried to manage in a few places, including Vancouver for a little bit, but yes. Chicago and St. Louis. And, then he realized that his forte was coaching. I suspect that will be Barry's way too.
Well, the thing about coaching is you've got a daily routine. You have interaction with the people in your charge. Mm-hmm. And while there will be a surprise here and there, or someone will drop something on you from time to time. Like, that's the daily life of a general manager, right? Like, I'm going about my day and, somebody's got a crisis that I now got to go, deal with. I can understand how coaches like sort of the routinization of their life as opposed to,
here's the other thing I will tell you. If Barry Trotz wants to get into management, he ain't going to be in Vernon very long in the summertime.
No, exactly.
And I mean, so, coaching the National Hockey League team is kind of like being a high school teacher. You get your summers off, and I think Barry likes that lifestyle, and I think Barry likes that lifestyle on the lake.
Well, you bump into Barry at Predator Ridge. You don't ever bump into Holland at Predator Ridge outside of his tournament because he's always so busy.
Well, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, we'll that's part of the. I see Cindy at Predator Ridge more than I see Kenny. That's for sure.
John Shannon is our guest. What are you hearing on Boudreau and his decision?
Nothing. He's back in Hershey. I do know that he's back at his summer home in Hershey, Pennsylvania right now. We're just, it's 22 days and counting, right? 22 days until Bruce is either the coach of the Canucks or he's not. And one would assume that until further notice, he's the coach of the Canucks.
Do you get the feeling that there's does he feel rushed, do you think? Does he feel uncertain at this point? Or do you think he's able to decompress a little bit?
Oh, no. Bruce? I think Bruce has got a pretty good grasp of everything. Remember, this is a date that Bruce had put into his contract. This was his date when it was negotiated. So this is working the way. This is working the way that it was supposed to work. And that's the one thing that Bruce is a pragmatist. Jimmy Rutherford's a pragmatist. Both of them understand that, I got till June 1st to figure out that I'm going to be the coach. And Jimmy says, well, I have to, and if you're still here, you're the coach for the year, so it's not anything that we're used to seeing when it comes to a hockey team, and this type of thing, opt in, opt out. So that's the one thing. And as we talked about last week, it's just the fact that it was just so public and transparent that has created a little bit of this discussion.
Would Boudreau be a candidate on the island, or is there?
I don't know. I don't know. I wondered that. I think he's probably, he has a good relationship with Chuck Fletcher in Philadelphia. Very good relationship there, because of his time in Minnesota. So you wonder does that make more sense? But what Lou is going to do, again, as I said, I don't think Lou does anything. And when he met with Barry this morning and told him he was no longer the coach, I can fully guarantee that Lou has a plan, and he's just not telling anybody yet. So,
does it
could be? The one there's the Tortorella name is one out there. The other name that I think we're going to start hearing as well, guys, at a certain point, is Joel Quenneville. We're going to start hearing Joel Quenneville's name back in the mix somewhere, somehow.
Doesn't surprise me. People were talking about Babcock and Quenneville. I said, I just, my gut was just telling me, there was no information, that we would hear from Quenneville a lot sooner than we'd hear from Babcock.
Well, I think Quenneville's was a greater crime in that, he was
it wasn't a crime.
Parcel of a cover-up.
It wasn't a crime. If it was a crime, he'd be arrested.
Sure. Okay. Well, I meant that in a colloquial way,
that's
but
a tough
he
word to
covered
be
up
using,
a sexual. Sure, he covered up a sexual assault. Is that better, John? Whereas Babcock maybe was mean to players in video sessions, but that's the extent of what we know publicly. And you may even know more than me, my friend.
I don't. He will have to, if Joel does get a job, he will have to go to the commissioner and ask for reinstatement. And apologize, because the one thing we haven't heard from Joel through the end of the Kyle Beach incident. He just disappeared. So that's going to be something. I know nothing about Joel's scenario, but I find it hard to believe that Joel Quenneville won't be coaching in the NHL next year.
Yeah.
Whoa, next year.
Next season. Wow. Next season.
Yeah. And that's a lot of Stanley Cup jewelry that I think is probably driving that. Boudreau participated in the recruitment of this Russian winger, Andrei Kuzmenko. Does that tell you anything, John, or are they sort of obliged to bring the coach to that?
I'm going to do my best.
Know who he's playing.
I will do my best Jim Rutherford impression. Well, he's under contract. He works for us. He's the contract. He's our coach for next year. That's who our coach is. So
Elliot reporting went further than that he was introduced as the guy that would be your coach. Same answer though.
But he is the coach. Yeah. Remember, they want him to coach the Vancouver Canucks next season. That's what Jimmy has said publicly.
And Kuzmenko and his representative in any scenario want to know who's the coach. Can I talk to him? What's going to be my ice time? What are you looking at in terms of line mates for me? So all of that computes. Your old colleague Jeff Merrick reporting the Canucks may have reacquired their indigenous third-round pick because they have offer sheets in mind. Boy, a lot of draft picks have gone out the door here of late. I can't imagine offer sheets and more of them going out the door. But that all said, you tend to get a younger player. Comes with a younger player,
but
right?
It also comes with a pretty aggressive offer. And do they have the cap space to make an aggressive offer?
What are you hearing on offer sheets this summer, if anything?
I think Blake brings up the key point in all of this: is which team has money to spend, and if you have money to spend, how do you have money to spend? What are you moving out in order to spend that money? You know, I think the facelift that Jim Rutherford is going to give this team, to me, is going to be, and you know, the draft is on the 7th of July. I think that's the other date where you say, okay, what is happening by the 7th of July to this roster? You know, where our JT Miller story is going to resurface. Obviously, Besser's name's going to be in that mix. Who else is going to be in that mix? But I you know, that, because I don't think you can do an offer sheet without having, you know, enough space to be able to do it. You know, and you know, I mean, how many offer sheets have we had recently? I mean, Kakimeni is one, but you know, and how did that work out?
Yeah, it's a long-term play for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, they hope pays off.
Said it in the past.
Yeah.
So like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, you hear about them, but you don't see it very often.
That's one day a year. I mean, and Merrick's a friend of mine. I love Merrick. He's always loved offer sheets. He's always been one of those guys that pushed him. They should do more offer sheets. And we used to laugh at him all the time at the office.
That's not nice.
True.
Laughing at poor shit.
Well, we've pushed offer sheets too, Blake. Like we've said, if they're in the CBA, how come they're not used? If they're not going to be used, then take them out of the CBA. Come up with a different system. And just for the record, some of the names that are offer sheet eligible this summer, it's pretty interesting. Guys like Dubois and Kirby Doc. You got defensemen like Noah Dobson on the island, Liljegren there in Toronto. So Mangiapane in Calgary. So it's an interesting crop if you're so inclined.
There's right now, in my opinion, there's one guy and you know, that would probably garner an offer sheet, and that's Dubois. That's Dubois. Yep. And would you pay the price for that?
That's it. Because you sort of have to overpay on the offer sheet because you have to make the other team, you have to give them pause on whether or not they feel comfortable matching.
But imagine Winnipeg after having a guy like Patrick Laine in their nest, and then in the end, all you have out of that is draft picks a few years later.
Except Winnipeg typically does very well at the draft table.
That's true.
Pretty much every Winnipeg high pick plays in the NHL.
Yeah, they listen. They do, you know, Kevin and Craig Heisinger, they do a very good job finding players to fit into what the Jets do. And you know, it becomes one of the challenges. And we hear about this all the time. Talk to every manager in a small market saying the only way we're going to get people to come here is draft picks. You know, we control their destiny for a while. People don't go to free agent towns very often, you know, for free agent wise. They don't go to Winnipeg. They don't go to Edmonton very often. They don't go to Columbus very often. There are, you know, those are the cities that, you know, don't sign a lot of free agents. And it's not just Canadian cities. There are some U.S. cities in that boat simply because, you know, they're smaller markets. You know, all of them have the same amount of money, basically. But it becomes how attractive is the city and how attractive is the organization. So the best way to do it, if you have long-term stability in your own job, is to do it slowly and profitably through the draft.
Keep your ear to the ground for us on Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I can't see how they could move $7.25 million under contract through 26-27, but they are apparently seeing if there is a market for Oliver Ekman-Larsson with his no move clause and his bloated salary. So you let us know if you hear anything about that.
Also, John, the good news is it's the draft lottery tomorrow, and the Canucks have put themselves in pretty good position for a number of years and have never won. Now finishing with the worst odds, tied with Vegas with the worst odds to advance. They will win the lottery tomorrow, won't they?
But they can't, and they can't
go all the way up.
They can only go up 10 spots. But well, here's the thing: the only person that's happy tomorrow that he can't be blamed for it is Jim Benning. You can't blame Jim for what happens at the draft lottery this time, because everybody used to, you know, slings and arrows at Jimmy when it came to the draft lottery. He can't even win the draft lottery. So.
Yeah, because they were in that hellish middle.
The number 6 spot, 5 or 6.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, my God. John, just so you know, Blake and I are scarred because we did so many on location draft lottery, come on down party, the Canucks may win shows, only to see bars deflate and the crowd just
as they sunk,
mass exit after the card comes up, 7th or 8th or
Pettersson.
Although that's it, they got Pettersson and Hughes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Quinn Hughes, and it's funny, the day of the draft, the day of the draft in Dallas, everybody said, yeah, Vancouver's getting Quinn Hughes. It's going to fall. Quinn Hughes is going to fall to Vancouver, and it was almost like it was ordained. So.
Yeah,
for this year. My
Thanks,
goodness,
Detroit for Philip Zadina. Thank you, Arizona, for Barrett Hayton.
You said you can't blame Benning. Heck, he did his utmost to try to win the lottery again this year before he left.
I don't know.
They were so bad
they
before
were
he left.
Hold on,
he did his best
at 8-15-2.
Oh, who drafted Demko? Who traded for Miller? Who
That's
there's
true.
a lot of players on that team that Jim Benning may, they just didn't seem to play as a team very well until Bruce showed up.
Yeah. Hey, put your television exec hat on. Draft lottery is a good show or a bad show?
Well, it's hockey content. It's 500,000 people. Yeah. You'll get 500,000 people on Canadian television.
Yeah, but it's stationary.
But did you like it? Did you relish it with the drama and the build of who's picking number one, or did you think, boy, there's a lot of schlock around a few minutes of actual interest?
Well, as a guy who was involved in it from the beginning, it was amazing that we were able to get 30 minutes out of it, or an hour some years. And I also,
yes.
I also remember I was lucky enough to sit in the sequestered room a couple of times, and things would happen, and I would say, "Is it over?" And they'd say, "Oh yeah, it's over. Now we just have to sit here for 25 minutes more." And you've already you checked your cell phone at the door, so you can't tell anybody. so it was kind of like New Year's Eve, guys. The clock ticks to midnight, and then say, well, "Are we done?" Yeah, it's over. New Year's Eve.
Wow.
So there was nothing to it.
Let's go to bed.
And you were forced to have human to human direct
interactions.
Yeah,
that's right. So how are the kids? How are the kids? What are you doing tomorrow?
Boy, I was going to say, those years you stretched it to an hour, take your prize, because that's tough slog.
Yeah, that was when Patrick Laine was lying back on the I was at Sportsnet by then, when Patrick Laine was lying in his bed talking to Darren Millard.
That sounds like Laine.
Yeah.
John, wonderful stuff. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll talk to you next week.
See you, boys.
And Shannon, John, our Monday NHL insider from the Bob McCown podcast and the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. Yes, we saw that it's scheduled for 3:30 our time Tuesday, which indicates they're going to have it wrapped in a tidy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tight.
Half hour
for
before
the first
puck
time.
Drop, yes.
There's a 4 o'clock game, so.
Dragging it out, it's not an hour's worth of
Well, here's
content.
the thing, is
we know something about dragging content out.
Who's doing the content? Like, is there going to be a separate ESPN show? Or is it going to be...
Oh, good question. Good question.
Because they might hand the mantle over to the American side this year, I think.
Because NBC was always happy to let Sportsnet do it, right?
Right. I think ESPN might be holding the conch here. We'll see what it looks like tomorrow.
Right. And, of course, the Canucks are 15th from the bottom, so can rise the 10 spots into the top 5. That's it. And it's a snowball's chance. But as Blake says, because nobody is expecting it, this is the year it will happen.